Private credit. So I mentioned in a previous episode that someone had reached out who had worked in private credit for an insurance company, and they'd kind of shared some of their experiences and given some feedback in the episode. Somebody else in the Rational Minded community, they identified themselves as a private credit fund manager. Obviously, they're anonymous, so I can't verify that, but based on their comments, I believe it. And at the very least, their comments are pretty interesting. So I'm going to share those. So they said that the payoff in private credit is like selling a deep in the money covered call. And so he said you can refer to the prior Rational Minder episode on that topic. All the points raised there when we talked about covered calls apply the same to private credit. So it's pretty interesting. And another parallel that they thought about was it's like private credit can be a lot like dividend investing, where the appeal is high distributions and the twisted benefits, less focused on capital gain. They said that you should definitely disregard the Sharpe ratio for private credit because returns are highly negatively skewed. You've also got limited upside, which reduces standard deviation, which is a double benefit for the Sharpe ratio. So I had talked about the smoothing being a reason to disregard Sharpe ratio, had not thought about the skewness. That's another good reason. So that makes talking about Sharpe ratios for private credit even more ridiculous than I thought. Then their last comment was that smoothing as a service is a real thing. Some investors ask for it. Others are mark to market only. But I thought that was pretty interesting. That some people will actually ask for, like they want the smoothing. So the concept of smoothing as a service is a real thing.
Oh, anyway. For sure it is. I talked to somebody on Twitter yesterday, and I was talking about volatility or something, and somebody came in and commented, and I'll butcher the quote exactly, but it was something like, "Oh, I hate my manager. He never has those like plus 30 years. He just gets me 7 to 8% every single year." And I was like, "Oh, it's probably a bunch of private credit and private equity and real estate and that kind of stuff." And so I didn't dig into it further. But to your point, like that individual was obviously being sarcastic. They loved this steady 7 to 8% every single year. So for them, it really was a feature, not a bug. And actually at the FPAC meetup, the Financial Planning Association of Canada meetup in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, I talked to another advisor that I know, and he works for a firm that does a lot of these private assets. And so we had a brilliant guy. His background, he's a mathematician by background turned advisor. And he fully recognizes that like clients do want that return smoothing, and it might lead to better decision making. And he felt like he's kind of at a crossroads, like, is my obligation to the best client outcome, and if that return smoothing can provide better outcomes and better decision making, then I actually do kind of owe him a duty to use these types of products. It was a really great conversation, and I can see why some investors want that type of smoothing as a service, as you put it.
This is something Morgan Housel talked about with Shane Parrish on the Knowledge Project a couple of weeks ago, was exactly that. Like, I don't pass judgment, he was saying, on how other people invest. If it works for you and you can stick with it, so be it. You have to find what works for you.
Well, this is why
I happen to be a Vanguard guy, ETF guy, 100% with a lot of cash. That works for my family, but that may not work for you. You may have a need to have an active portfolio or some other type of portfolio.
Well, and that's why when I win my $1 billion, it's all going into whole life for that steady smoothing effect.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a benefit to me.